Hello, health champions. Today, I want to talk about what intermittent fasting really is, and why it's become such an incredibly popular and successful tool for weight loss. But most importantly, I'll explain how to transition into intermittent fasting with the least amount of problems and discomfort. So, the first thing to understand about intermittent fasting is that it's not a diet. It is not tied to any particular kind of food. Rather, it is a pattern of when you're eating, and more importantly, when you're not eating. The benefits of this are a reduction in weight and an increase in health. This is because we're affecting two of the most important hormones in the body. The first one is that we're lowering insulin, and the second is that we're increasing growth hormone. Insulin is your fat-storing hormone, so we want to reduce it. Growth hormone is a fat-burning hormone, so we want to increase it. However, insulin is the more important one because, in the body, insulin is kind of like a sledgehammer. It is so powerful that it overrides most of what every other hormone is doing. But if we can do both, then that's obviously better. Now, I mentioned that it's not tied to a specific food. Any kind of food that you eat will work. However, it will work much better if you eat foods that also reduce insulin and trigger less of an insulin response. Why is that? Because insulin drives fat into the cell and glucose into the cell, which is converted to fat. But at the same time, when insulin is high, it prevents the exit of fat, keeping us from using the fat that we have stored. When we don't have access to our energy reserves, your body senses a lack of energy, even though there is plenty of it. As a result, you get hungry. So it's much easier to eat foods that don't stimulate so much insulin. You'll be much happier in the long run. If we look at fat burning over a 24-hour period, right after you have eaten, you're in fat storage mode. The longer you go without food, the more likely your body is to stop storing and start using and burning fat. While you're in fat storage, your insulin is high, and your growth hormone is low. As time goes on, you move more into fat burning, insulin goes down, and growth hormone goes up. For most people, they will have at least an 8-hour period somewhere in their day. This is typically because they are sleeping for 8 hours or nearly 8 hours most days. However, many people never really go beyond those 8 hours, so they don't get into that fat-burning zone. They store fat at first, and then they just barely get ready, but then they wake up and eat. This is why it's so difficult to lose fat and weight on a frequent meal plan. This is what we typically call 16 to 8, meaning you're fasting for 16 hours and eating for 8 hours. If we compare the fasting period to the eating period, the period where you are storing fat versus where you're burning fat, we are at a ratio of 1 to 2. So, only 33% of the time are we actually burning fat, which makes it very difficult to lose weight. If we add just a few hours to this, we'll be at 12-12. If we increase it to 16 to 8, we have changed this ratio from 1 to 2 to 1 to 1. Now we have 50% fat burning, which is a dramatic increase just by extending it a few hours. If we can go 4 more hours, now we're at 16 to 8, and we have reversed this ratio to 67% fat burning and only 1/3 fat storing. If we add just 2 more hours to that, that's called 18 to 6. 18 hours of fasting and 6 hours of eating. Now, 75% of the time we are in fat-burning mode rather than fat storing. If you go one step further, that's called OMAD, 1 meal a day, and that doesn't mean that you're burning 100% of the time, because your body gets out of fat burning when you eat something. But you get the idea. The longer you go without food, the more favorable it is for fat burning. Now, the die-hard calorie counters are going to say the only thing that matters is that you have a calorie deficit. While it is technically correct, you can make it hard on yourself or you can make it easy on yourself. Which do you think sounds smarter? The hard way is to eat low-fat 6 times a day. If you eat low-fat, that means you eat high-carb. High-carb stimulates more insulin to combat blood sugar. With high-carb, you're going to have high blood sugar spikes and fluctuations, producing a lot of insulin 6 times a day, and sending a powerful message to store fat. When insulin is high, as we said, it makes you hungry. When insulin is high, you can't access what you have stored. So your body thinks the only way to provide energy is to eat more, making you hungry. That is why it is so much harder to eat frequent meals and low-fat to reach that calorie deficit. Plus, it's going to backfire if you don't lower insulin in the long run. A better way is to eat low-carb, high-fat 6 times a day. Not a great way, but it's better because now you have less blood sugar. Therefore, you still make insulin 6 times a day, but you make less. Even better would be to go low-carb, high-fat, and intermittent fasting. If you eat just twice a day, now you're only going to make insulin twice a day, and you're going to make much less. So, do you have to have a calorie deficit? Yes. But if you focus on the calories and eat frequent small meals, you will get hungry. If you go to lower carbs and fewer meals, it makes it so much easier. In fact, it makes it so easy that most people forget that they're trying to accomplish something. It's just so convenient with that lifestyle that they do it for the rest of their lives. Now, before I talk about how to go from 6 meals a day to 2 meals a day, there's something super important to understand. You want to think of your body as a metabolic machine. It takes food and turns it into energy and tissues. Carbohydrate is one of these things that it turns into energy. But if you have abused this machine, which the entire modern world has done, then your body isn't processing carbohydrates appropriately. When the machine was new, it had no problem. It was working flawlessly. But over time, with too much abuse, you wear it out. If you're insulin resistant, which most people who are overweight are, then you are carbohydrate intolerant. Think of it as a sensitivity. Your body just doesn't work to process it anymore. Basically, your sugar machine, your carbohydrate machine, is broken. If it's broken, then you have to fix it. You have to repair it before you can use it again. In the body, that's called healing, and that takes some time. If you go cold turkey, if you say, "Oh, I've eaten 6 meals, high carb, junk food, fast food, and I'm just going to go straight to it," it will work, but you're going to have a lot of discomfort, and the likelihood of you turning it into a long-term lifestyle is not that great. Instead, if we do it gradually, then it's almost like you're not even noticing what's happening. Here's how I want you to do it to make it so easy that you don't even notice something happened, except you start feeling better and better. On a 24-hour period, if you eat your breakfast at 8, then have snacks, lunch, snacks, dinner, and a late evening snack at 11, that means you have a 9-hour fasting window and a 15-hour feeding window. The first step that anybody can do is just cut out the snacks. You'll be a little bit hungry, but don't worry about it, you can absolutely do it. Then what happens is not only have you reduced your insulin spikes from 6 times to 3 times, but you've already cut back your window by 3 hours. So instead of 9:15, you're now at 12:12. Then you take your 3 meals and push them a little closer together. You start moving your breakfast just a little bit later, maybe 15, 20, or 30 minutes per day. You move your dinner a little bit earlier until you're going from 10 to 6, or whatever hours fit you. Now you have an 8-hour window, so you go from 12:12 to 16 to 8. What you don't want to do is rush this. You don't want to try to get this over with in a couple of weeks. If it takes 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or 4 weeks to go from one stage to the next, that's totally okay. Give your body the time it needs to adapt, repair, and become fat adapted, because as you start cutting back the frequency of meals and the number of insulin spikes, your body gets better and better at burning fat. It becomes more fat adapted, and now it's easier and easier to go a little longer without food. Here is your key point. Don't eat until you're hungry. So many people just eat because it's 9 o'clock or because it's 12 o'clock, or they are in some place where they usually eat. Well, don't eat until you're hungry because your body is changing. What you find is it's going to be super easy, you don't even think about it, you just skip breakfast. A lot of people in my clinic, once we start cutting back on the carbs, say, "Do I have to eat breakfast?" They've been told all their lives that breakfast is the most important meal, so they eat it just because they think they have to. But at this point, they just cut it out. Then you start cutting this out. You can have lunch a little earlier. Now you're eating 2 meals a day, 6 hours apart, and you have gone from 16 to 8 to 18 to 6. You get the idea. Now you're eating 2 meals a day. You start moving the meals a little bit closer together. Now they're 4 hours apart, and you have gone from 18 to 6 to 24. So how far do you need to take it? Well, there is no one diet. There is no one perfect intermittent fasting pattern. It depends on your body and your goals. If you get all your desires at 16 to 8, then that might be where you stop. But if you don't, let's say your blood pressure goes down, your blood sugar goes down, but you're not losing any weight, then you keep going if that's your goal. The next step after this would be if you want to go a little bit further, then you cut out one more meal, and now you're doing what's called OMAD, 1 meal a day. If you just listen to your body, keep learning about the why and the how, and let this unfold in its own time, then before you know it, you'll be eating once or twice a day, and you'll be wondering how you could ever do anything as absurd as eat 6 times a day. Most people who get to that point, 1 or 2 meals a day, become their new norm, their new lifestyle. It's just like not having to cook and eat all the time. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to learn more about how the body works and how to master your health, that video is going to be a great one next. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.